me call the meeting to order officially at 7:05. This is the meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee for March 30th. Called to order at 7:05. And we are not meeting at the town hall. This is a first of probably many Zoom meetings that we are running. And just to be clear, we have myself, Chris Fowles, we have Cindy Palmer, Brittany Taylor, Francine Tishman, Christina Madsen, and Ken Comia, our PVPC consultant, who's been gracious enough to host the meeting for us. We might have Jim Sini coming. I don't know. I haven't heard from him, and I don't have a phone contact for him. He's gotten all the emails, so maybe he will pop in. I'm not positive on that. Okay. All right. So before we get going, how is everybody? Everybody hanging in there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. I know. Kind of crazy times. It's not easy for anybody, for sure. Well, thank you all for making the effort to get together tonight. We can talk about it in terms of how much we really want to do and whether we should be pushing to do this or whether we want to postpone for a while, etc. But we'll go through a few things tonight and see how far we can get. I think we probably don't have any public comments. I don't see anybody else trying to pop in on us.
I don't see it.
No. Okay. Then we do have some.
There's Glenn.
There's Glenn. Hi, Glenn.
Glenn
Do you want to make a comment, Glenn?
Yeah, you're the public comment. Good. All right. Well, we do have a couple of minutes to approve. So let me see if I can share those, Ken, and then we'll turn things over toward you later here. So let me try and share these for a minute. Hold on a minute. Okay. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve, which the first one was the one from January 15th. And this was the joint meeting that we had, a partial joint meeting we had with Planning Board back at Town Hall. And at that one, it was Cindy, Francine, Jim, and myself that were there. And this was the time when Planning Board had agreed to sort of be our sponsor for the DLTA grant. So these minutes were sent out to you. I don't know if anybody had any thoughts about them or if I need to have you take a minute and read them, or shall we move forward?
I'm okay with them.
As am I.
All right, can I have a motion?
I move to accept the minutes of the January 15th meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's consider those meeting minutes approved. And I'm going to get rid of that one and see if I can do the next one. Hold on. And these are the minutes for the lengthy meeting that we all had. This is post Ken's chat with the select board, but it's the one that we all had back a couple weeks ago now, almost 3 weeks ago. Yep, March 9th, where we really went into more detail about some of the issues on participation. We talked a lot about our strategies, what we might do. We looked at the questions from the appendix in the master plan and tried to figure out, we looked at the questions, but mostly the answers, and tried to figure out some of the questions that weren't that clear. So we had this is a very long set of minutes, but we all are the same ones that were there. So I think, except maybe, no, everybody was there. Yeah. So if there's anybody that.
I just want to point out there's an attachment to those minutes, and that's the graphic that Chris put up.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I had that. I don't know where it is, but here somewhere. Oh, there it is.
It was in the email.
That one. Yeah, here it is. So this was part of the minutes as well. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to close that one. I'll try that. Okay. All right. So this is basically, if you remember, we had a lot of things written on the blackboards. We were trying to figure out what might be the ways to do some community outreach, why it was important, and those kinds of things. We brainstormed quite a few ideas. We looked at our community calendar as to when we might be able to do this as well. So does anybody have any thoughts about this? It's lengthy, but I thought it was necessary to have the detail in there so that we didn't forget what we were trying to do. If anybody has any questions, if not, we can move to approve them. Anybody want to review a special section or anything, or are we okay?
I'm good.
So am I.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes of March 9th.
Have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's consider them approved. Good. So I'm done with minutes. That was easy, I think. All right, so basically we're gonna go to, I think, the old business. And that really is kind of two things. It's one, to see if we have some questions that you all were going to try and get back and think about questions that we might want to include in a new survey. But also to go through the sort of the statement of work or scope of work that Ken had prepared to see that, first of all, we're all on the same page length, because we didn't really have a chance, not everybody was there, and we didn't have a chance to really discuss it the night you had it at town meeting. So do you have that handy, Ken, or?
I do.
All right, maybe you could share that one, and then we could maybe just kind of go through it and see if we have any additions, thoughts about that before we jump into questions on the survey.
Okay, let's see.
I really wish Jim would kick in. Anybody got his phone number?
I looked up and I do not, Chris, sorry.
Let me text Janet, maybe she can reach him.
Okay.
This is my first time trying to share something. Let's see if it works.
Yeah, you can share down at the bottom. There's a green button to share, I think, Ken, and then put your document up and then hit share again.
Okay.
Okay.
There we go.
There you go.
Good.
Great.
Okay. All righty. Can we make it any bigger? I don't know. Let's see. Oh, I guess I can. I guess you just click on it to make it bigger on your own screen. Maybe. Oh, no. Actually, no. Ken, I think you have to control it, yeah?
Yeah. I can move it there.
There you go. That's better.
That's better. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, alrighty. So let's kind of go through this, because I think it's important that we are all on the same wavelength here. We put in some ideas in the grant application itself, and Ken took that and came up with this framework. But I think we want to be real clear as to what we're going to spend our time doing and what we hope to get out of it. So I wanted to really focus us a little bit on this, because we didn't all have a chance to look at it that day. So.
Did you get my text?
Do you want to mute it? Do you need to mute it? Or do you want? I only have his work cell number,
Oh, okay.
so
All
I
right.
guess can't find the home number for him.
Okay.
so.
All right.
Well, that's all right. He's gotten enough emails. Okay, so scope of services. Let's maybe. So the first thing, in consort with other town entities. So
Yeah.
I guess in consort would be planning board and select board.
Need him for a quorum?
I would say that normally how this would work would be working with you all as the committee. But if there are some instances where I would need to update information, like working with the assessor's office or the building department to try to get up-to-date numbers with regards to building permits, let's say, or other information that would be helpful, like the assessor's data. That's probably, those are the types of departments that I'm
Mhm.
probably
Okay.
assistant. Probably also like highway and the town administrator.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah, I think we'll essentially be the lead group for now anyway. I mean, all of us have got representation on different committees, so that's a good way to start at least, and we'll see how we need to involve other committees as we go forward. Okay, so maybe Ken, why don't you just walk us through number one, and let's just kind of talk it through and tell us what you were thinking there.
Sure. So I think, as I mentioned in the previous meeting with the committee, as well as sharing at the joint select board, planning board, and committee meeting, I think reviewing the what you've done to date with regards to creating a narrative that talks about what you've done to date, I think is probably the baseline to see where we can go from there. And I think doing so would allow a discussion that the committee has been meeting, and this could be shared with the residents in whatever way you think is helpful, and basically creating a narrative to the work that you've done to date. You've created priorities. The select board has additional priorities that it wants included. I think it's creating a document, a report that talks about the work that you've completed to date. That would be one component of this final report. I think the next component would be looking at current data, as you would with any other type of master plan or update to the master plan. We won't be in a position to see new census data, but there is up-to-date American Community Survey data that's out there that could be, that may show some trends from when you had your original master plan completed. I think the biggest component, and it sounds as if your conversations as a committee at the last meeting, as well as the spirited discussion that we had at the select board, the joint meeting, with regards to community engagement, is probably the biggest piece. Maybe the biggest piece to discuss how to involve the community and understand how you want the community involved with regards to priorities that have already been or goals and positions that the master plan has already stated, and how you want to incorporate either confirmation of those goals and objectives through community survey, as that's part of our discussion tonight, as well as through any sort of outside engagement that we may have. And then the final document is a creation of an action plan, which would be similar in that, similar to either a reconfirmation of those goals and objectives and ways to reach the resolution and find those resources and identify those resources in this final document to the town. That's kind of how I imagine this particular product to look like, and what type of processes we would be using to engage and create a document that was reflective of the town.
Good. Well, thanks for that. Let's kind of maybe go through each of those points and be sure that we all understand and agree that that's what we think can get us where we want to move forward. I think I'll just start out on the first one. I guess I'm not quite sure about documenting again our recent efforts, because it's our recent efforts, which has taken a whole year to do basically. And then we've come up with what I would call preliminary results. I wouldn't really say that we've established priorities, but we've come up with some preliminary results from our discussions. But those have already been laid out in, maybe 10 slides in a PowerPoint presentation that Mike did, that laid them out, per chapter with the suggested priorities. So how would we go about, why would we need to create more of a narrative around that? And how, I just don't want to see another lengthy report about how we've been talking for a year, I guess.
I don't even think it's going to be that. It basically to create the baseline of which this final report is going to look like. I think you want to be able to, it's setting the stage that the committee has been working. It's sought out assistance in communicating these solutions or these goals and objectives that that the town has identified through this committee, that it should be that has been singled out through this particular process that you've employed over the past year. I think it's part of the document. It doesn't. It's one of those things that I think is, if anything, it's literally a section of the report that just basically incorporates the work that you've done to say that this is how we've reached. It's part of the process. So it talks about the process and lays out the process for the year.
So Ken, regarding that specifically, I think a baseline is a good idea. Do you see that as, taking a great deal of your time? I think that,
You've done all the work. It's communicating and putting it into a couple of paragraphs, what you've done. I think the thing that's going to take up most of my time is going to be the final report.
Yeah.
It's going to be using the data, working with the committee through whatever meetings, and having you review the product and suggest changes at the end of through this process, as well as the community engagement piece, which we'll be discussing.
Okay.
Anybody else have any thoughts about that?
No. I guess it's important to include, and I guess that'll be part of it, what has been accomplished since the master plan was written from then to now.
Well, maybe in short form, though. I think.
Oh, yes, yeah.
If I'm hearing Ken, because we've gone through and tried to figure out, what was accomplished in each of the levels of the strategies at each chapter level. But if I'm hearing this right, then we're talking about summarizing the kind of the process we went through, maybe in a page or two of how we functioned over the past year.
Yeah, I think that's just again, it's to set the stage for the work that's going to be happening. I think you'll want to, in using this document, to give to agencies that may provide you additional funding for your projects. I think they're going to want to see and want to hear about the various the process by which you came to your decisions.
Yeah, no, that makes a certain amount of sense. That especially if we're looking for funding or whatever else, they'd want to know how we got to where we are and how we've come up with these ideas, I suppose. Yeah.
It's not a major component of the project, but it's a component of the project.
Yeah.
I agree with Chris. If in your experience, Ken, if it's what we're what we're looking for to implement, whether it's in applying for a grant or something, then it's critical that you do include that. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's, as an example, and I can't pull it up right now, but it came up at select board the other night. We had an inquiry from Mike's presentation on the, when he presented this sort of the summary of the chapters to select board, there was one there for, I think it was for, was it land use or something? No, it was housing, I think. But there was one, and I can't pull it up, Francine, you might have it too, but it was something that Heather Pellegrini
Right.
emailed a question about land size and couldn't understand why master plan was recommending a larger size for house plots because that was going to be
Yeah.
some level of, I don't know,
Yeah, it was
discrimination or whatever.
Yeah.
And it came up as a public communication. So when we had select board the other night, I just simply said, look, we did nothing new. We didn't write any new recommendations. We simply tried to pick out the ones that we thought were somewhat reasonable and doable, and we picked them out of the existing master plan and just tried to isolate them, highlight them in each of those sections. So I tried to sort of, dissuade the idea that we were making brand new recommendations all of a sudden, and this was actually one that's been sitting there for 6 years. But we'll probably get some feedback on that too. But
Yeah, it was.
just to say somebody was actually watching, and so
Yeah.
it's important for them to understand how we did do what we've done so far. I do tend to agree with that. So I think it's really, it's documenting the process of what we've gone through to kind of establish the preliminary results. I guess I'd like to somehow throw some of those words in number one there, just to be clear, but that's my only thought.
Okay.
Yeah, she was concerned that we were increasing the minimum lot size,
Right.
which says that was an objective of the original plan. And I'm thinking maybe somehow that should be a question perhaps that we raise in a new survey, just to see what the sentiment of the town, has it changed from then to now?
Mhm.
Well, I'm thinking about what I believe I read about that recommendation for the increase of the lot size, and it might have to do with preservation of open space, and that was the rationale behind a larger lot size. That might be why. If you have a larger lot size, then you essentially have a greater preservation of open space.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't a larger lot size throughout town. It was in selected
Right,
areas,
it
I
was.
believe.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
Yeah, and I can't pull up her email. Well, I should have, but anyway, just to say that people may have those kinds of questions based on how we've kind of synthesized, the 50 or so recommendations for each chapter down to 10. So it's probably good that we do something that kind of explains how we got to where we are right now. Okay, so any other thoughts on number one? Are we okay with the way it's written? Do we want to change the wording on it? Are we all clear what we're talking about here?
I feel more clear, Ken, with your explanation this evening in terms of, I'm taking notes, of course, setting the stage, giving the preliminary results, but more importantly, for me anyway, helping to document something that would support whatever we need to do if we need to apply for grants or other funding for implementation of some of the important points we're making. So that part is important. I didn't want to see a redo of the work done today because we had done so much so far.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks, Ken.
Yep. Okay. Then number two, I think you've already mentioned that, that would be touching base with whatever town resources you need to get up-to-date information. And hopefully that should take us, well, at least through 2018, right?
Right. I think some of the data sets that would need updating is building permits, and if there's any new population numbers, houses built,
Yeah.
among other things. I
Yeah.
think it literally there's a basic list that I think could basically just introduce the demographics of the town and the various data.
And so this would kind of be a comparison thing showing how it changed,
Yeah.
maybe from 2012 or whatever.
Right.
So, Ken,
Yeah.
the Open Space Committee, and it specifically has to do with number 2 here, the Open Space Committee working towards the goals that the Open Space and Recreation Plan update will need to do, Conservation Commission as well. We're aware that some of the parcels in town, which may or may not have been in Chapter 61 status, might be coming up for potential sale or development. And we know of a large one that's coming up way up near the Tycarmody Reservoir. I'm wondering if part of your data increase will be working, like you said, with the assessor's office to identify some of these tracts that might be important to understand whether they would be good to conserve or good to encourage the landowners to think of other options for conservation. Would that be part of your data tracking?
Yeah, I would say that is probably a data set that, you know, we'd look at wanting to get up-to-date information. I think, as you said, Cindy, it would be duplicative in an open space committee update or the open space recreation plan update. However, in a master plan, you know, one of the sections is your open space and natural resources section, which would want to talk about that because it's a position of conserving those lands for resources or whatnot. So
Yep.
I think having a number there, you know, you can get that number in an open space plan. You can get that number through the master plan. Either way, you'd use either or both documents.
Right.
Let's say if you're getting a park grant or, you know, any sort of trails grant, they're going to want to know.
Right. That's, as you know, our community has been actively working in that direction the last few years. We've applied for grants. We've been awarded grants. Trails grant is, we're waiting for the award on that one, we hope. All of that should work in concert. That's my comment on this data collection, that your assistance in this will help so many aspects of the town moving forward, and especially in the light of climate resiliency issues that we know are
Of course.
much bigger than they were in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And is it going to matter? Some data we can get through fiscal year 20. You know, for instance, the town census, I believe, is due tomorrow. It was the last day that people could submit that information. So population we can get that would be very current. Same with, unless you want it all to remain the same, which would be the end of what, the calendar year 19 on your data?
I mean, if we can, depending on the trajectory of this project, I think it probably would be good to get your numbers as up to date as possible. So
Yeah,
if we can get, you know, whatever the clerk gets for those towns, if we can get an accurate number, then that's probably what we should be.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
something like that, Francine, I would agree that we should get it as accurate as possible. But other things I would like to say, you know, let's not get bound by fiscal years, but rather by calendar years. That would be my suggestion. I think a lot of people get confused on fiscal years, and
I mean, yeah, and I think what we're going to find is that a lot of the data outside of what is provided by the town is through the federal government and the American Community Survey. So it's not necessarily going to be 2019 data. If that data set is from 2018, that's...
I see. Okay. Even though we have it available to us, but to keep it all,
well, if it's
all the reference points the same.
Yeah, yes. I mean, if it's available, and we can glean whatever we can from the data that the town collects through the various processes, that's awesome.
Yeah.
If it's not, we'll
Okay.
kind of set the scene with the American Community Survey data, and not the census data, because that's now 10 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, just when we get going with, the town, our state fiscal year of, June, July, and then if you get a federal, bit of data in there, that's going to be a totally different set of timeframes. It's going to be the October, September timeframe for feds. So
And
anyway,
I believe, yeah, okay.
so whatever we can do to keep it somewhat consistent, but to the extent we can go more by calendar year if we can, but I guess it's going to depend on the data that we run across.
Yeah.
That we're going to find that's important. Okay. All right. So number 3, I think, Ken, we took a huge stab at that last time, which I think you saw from the notes. So I think we're basically in agreement with that. And I think I might just add at the end is just the understanding of community's current sentiments. And I think I might just suggest we add perception of needs or perception of priorities. I don't know. What's anybody else think?
Well, as I mentioned to you earlier, Chris, I think that may shift as a result of what we're currently going through.
Yeah.
You're talking about the current pandemic crisis, Francine?
Yes. Yes.
Certainly would.
I don't know. Any thoughts? Do we want to just leave it the way it is? Is that clear enough? And
Well, as a general statement, I think it's a great idea to understand the residents' perceptions of priorities, but I think we're a dynamic community. We're changing all the time, whether it's the pandemic or the population or it's good to get a snapshot of this moment somehow. But I agree with Chris, perception of priorities should be included in there.
Okay.
so basically, I think we're all in agreement that we need some sort of public participation strategy. A lot of the things that we brainstormed, 3 weeks ago may not be realistic anymore, but we'll have to deal with that as we go forward, I guess.
That's
And
for
then
sure.
finally, number 4, I think this is our real crucial one. This is our real deliverable, right? So
Right, that's the final report, final plan, the document that you'll be using, and that will go through a review process once we complete the community engagement portion and kind of understand the sentiment and can write that in a narrative, and have that reflected in a narrative. That is what is going to be the final document. So it's going to provide information on the various resources that the town can seek, and the agencies that are involved, and the funding mechanisms that may be involved at the moment.
good.
Can
So
it also include
Yeah.
some kind of an assessment of the, I hate to use the term, low-hanging fruit, the things that are achievable versus the things that are a great idea, but big challenges to get there, such as, for example, public wastewater system. That's very expensive. Is that something we're going to see in our lifetimes, or is it necessary? Greenway has always been a very hot item in people's, they think of it immediately. Is that achievable? When? How? What are the barriers? I think I'd like to see that in the action plan document. People are going to say, these are things we really want to see, but I want to see what's achievable and what barriers exist and what has to be overcome to get to achieving them if possible.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with that. As I think of an action plan, I'm kind of looking for a roadmap, I think.
Yeah.
And I think maybe select board is too, of, okay, here we go. We've got, some ideas. We've got a 5-year plan. How do we begin and where do we begin? So what can we get done? Where are the resources? How do we access those resources? And what are the advantages or disadvantages of, embarking on a certain strategy, for example? What are
Another big one is the public safety complex. We know
that'll be huge.
people have been talking about that for several years, and I don't know where it stands right now. I don't know, who knows.
So I think it is that, you know, the action plan, but let's be a little bit precise there, that the action plan that talks about the achievability of certain strategies, and the, you know, delineates whatever the resources possible or how to access things. I mean, let's just flesh that out so that we're all clear that we're looking for something that really we can hang our hats on and move forward with.
Yeah, I think what's important is the feasibility of achieving those goals, so that in 10 years or 7 years, when we go through this exercise again, we're not,
Yeah,
we're putting things out there that can be accomplished, as opposed to making a laundry list of wish list.
exactly. Yeah.
That we
No,
may or
I
may
think-
not get to. And I think that's being very realistic, and I think very honest, and I think might reduce some of the frustration I think that some people feel.
Yeah. And I think that's where I was thinking when we put it together for the application for the grant, was we're looking for a 5-year plan. You know, we're not talking about something necessarily in the future, just sort of recreating the master plan again about, you know,
Right.
immediate and long term, but, you know, what can we do now in 5 years? What can we, you know, start with, and how do we actually go about it? So I think a bit of analysis that goes into that, not just a listing of things, but an analysis of the achievability, the advantages, disadvantages, the resources that might exist. You know, it might be something that was maybe lower on our priority list at one point, but gee, all of a sudden there's federal money that exists, and it's a matter of an opportunity that we can't pass up, kind of thing, you know? So that's where I think, you know, we need to have that summarized as clearly as possible, so that we know what we're, you know, aiming for here.
Good.
Brittany, Christina, any thoughts? I'm going to shut up for a while.
No, I think you got it all. I think that's exactly right.
Maybe Ken, could you flesh that out a little bit based on what we've just been talking about, so we have that more delineated?
Creation of an action plan document.
I don't know that we need to put you on the spot, Ken. You might want to think about the wording.
Yeah.
You can think about it. Yeah, but just to say that, you know, as we meet again, whatever, that we maybe, you know, maybe at that point we all agree on that, and we can you know, just have that just written out a little bit more specifically. So we could do that another time, but if you would just mind adding in a few words there to sort of delineate that better.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're trying to get out of this report.
Yeah.
With regards to the analysis.
Because it won't be just us. It's something that we're going to have to present to other people in town as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're going to say, well, how did you come up with that one? And what's the advantage of doing that? And so we need to have that level of analysis, I guess I would say, for lack of a better word, in there, showing, you know, why we are recommending X, Y, and Z kind of thing. Okay.
Yep.
All righty. Okay, so next, I guess it's still part of old, I don't know if it's old business or new business. Maybe it's new business. The possible questions. So we had thought, Ken, you know, based on our meeting last time with the various outreach ideas we had, that probably the thing that you can help us out the most would be with the survey,
Okay.
given your experience in doing these in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And we had pulled up, and I actually have the questions. If you want, I can share those, the questions that we had from the old survey, and then the few questions that have come in to me.
Sure.
And just start talking about that and see what we think.
Okay, let me give you the
So
option.
maybe you unshare, and I'll see if I can find this thing here. Okay, hold on. I lost it. Well, hold on. Let me get this out of here. Where'd you go? Okay, let's see. Well, this is maybe it. Okay, let's try this. Okay, so I have a few questions that came in. And I have the old survey pulled up. I may have to back out and pull it back up again. I thought I had it minimized here. So Christina, I know you said that you thought the questions in the survey that was done before they were pretty good and pretty well thought out. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and see what you were thinking?
Well, I did. I reread the original survey and I thought, why not just ask those questions again? We are wanting to determine whether sentiment has changed, and it would be a good comparative thing. I am of the opinion that we shouldn't try to reinvent the wheel here. We have a good survey generally. Certainly it can be revised a little bit, but I would personally recommend starting with that, updating it if and where it needs to be updated, and we can compare very quickly whether sentiment has changed or not. It's not a cumbersome. It's not a cumbersome survey. It's lengthy, but not cumbersome to fill out. And so that was my thinking.
Okay. Well, let's maybe just go through. These are the questions that came in, just so we can see them. There's only not too many. And then we can go back to the survey itself. Would that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So these questions, if you can see this, everybody, this is from Jim originally. So
Yeah.
he suggested 5 questions. So if you could change one thing about Southampton, what would it be? Then annual expenditures are divided as follows, and he would show a pie chart there. How would you want to distribute the town's revenue? That's interesting. So these are brand new questions, okay? Should Southampton have more 2 to 3 bedroom homes on smaller lots? So that maybe gets back to Heather's question or not. I'm not sure it does. Should Southampton have more affordable housing, rent or mortgage, less than 30% of household income? But this is all the definition of affordable housing. And then for Southampton seniors, should there be? And he's given the choices here. So those are his 5 questions, kind of from the housing perspective that he was thinking about. After he sent that, he sent me another mail saying, well, these are my first thoughts I wanted to get down, but I may have some different ones. So unfortunately, we don't have them tonight, but we can see where we are.
Well, can I interject one thing?
Sure.
The planning board informs me that number 3 specifically, we have small lot sizes, the smallest that can accommodate the fact that people have to have their own septic system. So you can't necessarily put larger homes on smaller lots, different than what we currently have because of that situation. You have to be able to accommodate a septic system on the lot based on the number of bedrooms, which of course reflects specifically the number of residents. So I don't know, I mean, I have to go back to the planning board and to the on the planning board besides me, who can speak to that, but they feel like we've got the smallest lot sizes possible for the fact that we don't have a public wastewater system.
Oh,
And I
wow.
think that
In our residential areas, sorry.
Wow.
I think there are a couple of areas that Jim is specifically thinking of, and I'm not sure that those house lots now meet the minimum requirement, and that would be Mountain View Circle and what we always referred to as the Delisle project down on Pomeroy Meadow. So I don't think those are current lot sizes. I think they're smaller, and I'm thinking that that's what he was thinking of. Because he referred to those too. He's referred to Mountain View Circle a few times.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, I'm not questioning you, Cindy, but I think that is what he was thinking of, is how those got to be there, and could there be more?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And we might just have to, rework that question if we wanted to use that, or if it's not similar to what's already in the old survey. So.
Well, all of those questions are addressed in a way in the old survey.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll just run through these real quick, and then we'll go over to the survey for a minute. The one thing that I thought was maybe different is number 2. His here showing where the expenditures are and how would you like to see the town's revenue distributed. So that might be a different one that I don't recall from the survey. Okay.
It wasn't, but I look at that and there are some things that we're absolutely obligated to pay, like schools and things like that. And that takes up, you know, the majority. I'm not sure that it's up for discussion or negotiable in that respect.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Well, I just wanted to, you know, just kind of go through what people's thoughts were, and then we'll jump over to the actual survey. So Cindy, you sent in these, and these were some that I'm not sure if they were ones that came out of the old survey or they were new ones.
No, I just made them up off the top of my head. I have to make a sort of preamble caveat here that I agree with Christina that there was a very, very good survey done previously. And I agree with her comment, we don't want to truly recreate the wheel. I did do these off the top of my head. Mostly, I wanted to focus on something simple, achievable, that people wouldn't get overwhelmed with a survey. I do think that things have changed since we last met, meaning I don't think we're going to be able to do a public meeting as much as we hoped. We're going to have to do this more as a written or mailed or, you know, some other way to do it. And I don't want to stop getting the information from town residents. But my concept is to do something easy, simple, that will not get thrown away, that we'll get good data from. So you don't have to go on it through every single one of these questions. I agree with Christina. We could use the original survey questions, perhaps more so.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is I'll send these out after the meeting. I'll just email them to everybody, so you've all got them anyway. Okay.
Okay.
So those are those, and then you had a couple more there. Telecommunications, public wastewater, and would you accept a property tax increase? So those, I think, were to one degree or another, they were in the original survey as well.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Mine, I couldn't get the formatting right. I picked out 5, and these are directly from the old survey. But it was regarding changing our town form of government. I thought that was a valid question back then, and I think it's come up a couple of times recently that it's like, maybe we should think about how we are governed, but going to a different kind of representative town meeting format. So that was one question, and these are the actual numbers of the question in the old survey. And then what should we use for the model of the way Southampton should look like? And this was, you know, the various town comparisons. I kind of like 17 myself. What kind of businesses would make Southampton a better place to live? You know, what do people want to see here? What kind of businesses do we want to attract if we're going to try and attract any kind of commercial businesses? So the 17 I thought was still a very, very good question. And then these others were housing related. If you were going to move to, you know, if you were going to downsize and move to someplace else in Southampton, what would you want to do? Those were there. And then that was basically it. So that was the kind of thought I had too. So for whatever they were worth. So that's what we had that, you know, we jotted down. But I think in reality, if I can pull that up, we're going to find this other document. Maybe if I can do this. Did I just do that? Okay, let me pull up the survey here. Come on.
Chris?
Yes.
While you're looking for that document,
yep.
And Ken, I'm going to say that number 17 that Chris just noted about what kind of businesses would you like to see in town, et cetera. We know there's just such barriers to bringing in certain businesses into our town.
Yep.
And we all might think it's a good idea to see, you know, 2 or 3 more restaurants or a couple more coffee shops or, you know, things that will bring in revenue to our town, you know, we'd love it. But what we know is, this is what I'm hearing time and time again from the planning board, is that you can't just say, let's do it. You either have to bring in public wastewater, bring in other kinds of services, or restructure how we develop our town. You know, we want to protect the scenic views, we want to protect the historic district, we want to protect the open spaces. We have for sale signs all the way through our commercial district right now. And yet people say, well, you can't build anything there because it's wet. You know what I'm talking about on Route 10, just south of, the package store that just went in there and south of the Big Y Plaza. So we have commercial districts, but to get development in those districts is not a simple thing.
I'm back.
So I'm just going to make that point that we'd like to see that, or are we going to just have to accept that we're going to have to give up something else in order to have that kind of development?
I think that conversation is going to pop up more than once throughout this process. And I think the planning board has identified that. And I'm sure a lot of the town residents have identified that, if there's certain type of development that the town wants, there are going to have to be some investments or some sort of mechanism for those businesses to locate in town.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think, I think it's, those questions are, I like to call those feel-good questions. I mean, it's to understand. Also, I think if there's an ability to say what types of businesses, town people want, there are some sort of strategies that you can employ going forward, and I think that that would be part of this document where you could say exploring like a district increment financing, a DIF or a TIF, and trying to figure out how to go about that. A lot of that, I think a lot of your larger businesses that require like wastewater or, obviously there's something to be said about that. Do you tap into Easthampton? There's just a lot of different conversations to have. And as you mentioned, Cindy, it's where in town you want that type of development.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously places you want to conserve and you want to preserve those vistas that you like to look at. But at the same time, I think, if you don't address it, then you're going to have these zoning bylaw map amendments that are coming in and asking to either increase the density or intensity of those particular sections of town. I think it's a continuing conversation that just continues to happen. But I think that having that type of question in a survey, I think is helpful just to understand.
Well,
as
and
long
maybe
as we're tapping into people's current feeling. And so we can say, we did this, we asked, and we have to accept the response that comes from the community, and we need to get as massive of a response as we can get. Okay, good.
Well,
Sorry,
and
Chris.
maybe too, just to follow up to make that realistic, is saying, okay, no, we know that we've got this wastewater issue in town. So therefore, Ken, you may have a better, sort of a list of, what are the kinds of businesses in general that do not require a massive sewer system? What could we even think about as our possible choices? So we could kind of give people more of a menu to look at rather than leave it so wide open-ended. Where we get frustrated again because the same answer is going to be there. Oh, we don't have sewer. So can we narrow it? So that would be a way to do that, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. The way they gave examples in the survey about how much commercial development do you want? Do you want it to look like Route 9 in Hadley? Do you want it to look like Granby? I think that comparison would help people, get to more of what, envision what it is they're asking for.
Okay, I've got
Also,
go ahead, Christina, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it also might be asked, what kinds of businesses would people be willing to have their taxes go up to put the infrastructure in for?
There you go.
Because that will help people kind of distill what they actually, what they do want, what they're willing to help pay for.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I've got this survey. Let me see if I can share again without losing you all. My connection was unstable apparently at one point here. Okay, here we go. So this was the beginning of it. Which, whenever we get ready to send something out, we can probably steal some of that same language at the beginning here, but I'll just maybe scroll through. I assume, I don't know, I'll just be the scroller. You guys can tell me when to move. Do we assume we have to ask some of the basic questions here just for the demographic who applies or who replies for this, Ken?
I think it's appropriate unless there are some other questions you want to include. I think these give a good snapshot of the types of people that live in town and their current situation.
And who's taking an interest in responding to the survey too? That could be compared with the last survey.
Right, exactly.
Can I ask why we stopped the age at 51?
That's a good point.
I mean, I wish I were 51 again. That's not my problem. My problem is what demographic are we really seeing here? I mean, I
Right.
think the third of the population is over 60 or over 65.
That's not age, Francine, that's how many years you've lived here.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
But the
I'm
age,
looking at age. I'm sorry.
but the
You
age
got it.
Number 5 is the age.
Further down, I got it. Thank you very much.
But on the other hand, number 5, why do we have to say 60 plus? We might want to break that down 60 to 70, 70 to
Yeah.
80.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, I think so.
Because 60 is very different than it used to be.
You got that right. 70 is too. 70 is
Yeah.
the new 40.
I agree. It is.
Okay. Yeah, so we'd probably modify that question a bit. All right, fine. Okay, I don't know.
These questions are all very quick to answer. So
Yep.
it seems as though it's fine to keep them all in there, I think.
Okay. We might.
You know, Chris, I gotta say, was this an attachment? Because I didn't see this. I don't know why I missed it. I didn't see
Yeah,
this whole question.
Chris sent it out as an attachment.
I'm afraid I missed it.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah. But see, the other day, remember in the report itself, we were going through the answers and we couldn't really fully understand all
Yeah.
the questions.
Yeah.
So this was the actual. This is what Mike gave me, that maybe Barbara gave him.
Right.
Okay,
And then I saw you emailed it out.
I did.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed it.
That's
Wow.
okay. So this is the one that I thought, whether this town representative government thingy here, I thought would still be interesting to see what people would say about that. I don't know. What do you think about number 14 though? I didn't find that terribly useful myself, but what's anybody else think? Things have changed. We've gotten our full-time, police and fire, and things have changed along those lines since this was originally done.
Mhm.
Well,
Again,
I think in terms of what Christina said about comparisons,
Yeah.
it might be helpful. If people were highly dissatisfied with police, when the original survey was collected and now they're very satisfied, that would be helpful to know. Police would probably like to know that. Same with senior services. I think it's worth it to put it out there.
Can we add something else here? And again, I come back to there's nothing question about the schools.
Uh-huh.
That's a
yeah.
good idea.
Yeah.
And I know everybody, to me, coming from a place where, in terms of larger community, here fire and ambulance is one and the same. It may not always be the same in other locations. Do you want to ask a question about ambulance services? Or just fire/ambulance?
No, let's separate them.
Okay.
Well, and another thought, not to mess it up, instead of having just yes, no, you can also say, you could list like 3 or 4 services provided by each of these entities. So we get some real data rather than just yes, no. So, I mean, there was a lot of grousing on social media way back when about the street sweeper, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't know what it would get us, but sometimes the yes, no questions just limit you.
You're right. So what are you suggesting, Chris?
Well, I'm just trying to say, so fire. So like Cindy was saying, or sorry, Francine was just saying. So is it fire and then fire services? So is it what would it be? I don't know.
Well, there's burning permits from the
Right.
fire department, and there's ambulance service, and there's
Ambulance service, EMT, drug drop off. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. We'd have to think about them. Is my point. But I'm thinking we could instead of having plowing and road maintenance and whatever, that would rather be highway department, and you would have plowing, street sweeping, brush cutting. I don't know. Would it get us anywhere?
It defines it better for people. I like that idea.
But from your experience, does it get us anywhere? I mean, I just find sometimes that people are just going to say, yeah, okay, it's fine, but they're not going to tell us anything. People don't usually, if they don't like it, they don't spend a lot of time writing why they don't, I think has been my experience anyway. But
I'm thinking about another town that I had done a master plan with, and we had the same question. And I was surprised at how many people responded for very specific things on when answering for certain departments. So they would be very descriptive with their no. I think if you were to break it out into specific areas within each of these various so like sub areas, like you mentioned, I think you would get a good there would be some good data as to the favorability of these types of services that are being provided and how the town is providing them and at what level. It's just maybe a lot of words. I don't know, and maybe it's maybe 2 sub areas per each one. I don't.
Yeah, I think maybe 3 at the most. I mean, for example, I'm thinking senior services. Francine, tell me yes or no. I mean, like monthly luncheons.
And transportation.
Transport services to medical appointments, field trips.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know, 3 or 4 things like that, and maybe people could rank them. I don't know. Just some thoughts. So we don't have to make any decisions tonight, but I mean, just let's kind of keep these things going in terms of what we might do, and then maybe we can do a little more fleshing out of that. But it just seems like it would get us some other interesting information. That was my only point.
Well, let me bring up something that came up in the open space and recreation plan, and that was communication, that people feel like they didn't know enough about certain things, specifically conservation lands. They didn't know about them. So that might be another town service. Should that be more attention be put on certain things like that?
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, let's
There's nothing there. I know we're talking about existing services, but looking ahead a little bit about, when you mention communication, we need to mention communication technology and all of that. Somehow we've got to get that on here.
Yep. Okay.
Totally agree.
All right. We'll keep on moving here. So this was the model based on the comparison with different towns. We kind of think that, I guess those are still similar comparisons, hopefully. We might have to check that.
What do you think, Ken? Would you change the way that number 15 is written?
No, I think it's, as I still get used to some of these communities on this part of the valley, because my last work was towards Worcester County. I think if you agree with these descriptors for each of these towns, then I think that's fine. Living in Easthampton, I would say that that's probably correct. Hadley, yes.
Okay. All right.
I don't think Huntington has much of a commercial center anymore. I think that kind of died, didn't it?
I mean, they have it right by that bridge. There's like a little town center.
Very little, yeah.
Yeah, very little. There may be a better example. I don't know. That we can put there.
Okay. Moving on. Historic Village Center? Christina, any thoughts? You want to modify that question any, or?
Oh, let's see, residential uses. Well, the question, the second option, you have to kind of wonder where might more commercial space. There's a limited downtown, and I'm not sure how it could be developed with more of those things, other than, for instance, repurposing the old town hall.
Right.
But there just isn't land for a lot more development in the historic village.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the question, I think, is still all right. You get an idea of whether people like it as it is, and
Yeah.
so.
Or would we ever want to ask people's opinions about, you know, the renovation of the fire department and the police department?
I think it's a good idea.
I think it's a great idea to ask that question. For example, if we were to see the safety complex be built someplace, you know, half a mile north, half a mile south of where our town center is right now, what would we do with those historic buildings that need a ton of work? Could you see a restaurant in those, or maybe a gift shop or craft project, or, you know, et cetera? I think this is a very good question to ask. So we want to know, what do people feel about the historic center?
Or a community center.
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. Good. I think, see, some of these, I think we can just tweak a little bit without really changing, you know, too much of it. Businesses, better place to live. So this did give a few examples, but again, I don't know. I guess this is where I was thinking, Ken, that maybe you could help us with some other ideas of potential businesses that would not necessarily demand large wastewater situations, systems for us.
Okay.
Maybe we could just tweak that one a little bit somehow. I don't know.
Sure.
And you know, Ken, you are aware that we had two items on the warrant of the special town meeting about bringing in commercial business in areas that required zone change. Can you think of ways to question that, which essentially would lead to zone changing, and whether people are in agreement with that or not?
Yeah. Well, and see, Cindy, if you look at 18 and 19, these are somewhat akin to that.
Yeah, I think 18 and 19 capture some of the discussion about where you want the, you know, a little more intense development.
Right.
If there are other geographic locations you want to include there, I guess, you know, that could be useful.
But again, isn't this going to still be limited by our wastewater issue?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's definitely going to be limited, yeah. But don't forget, down at the Westfield line, it's already zoned industrial.
But we don't know yet. I don't think we know whether Easthampton or Westfield is willing to have us hook onto their systems. Are they?
They're not immediately willing. There's barriers. There's the sense that it would have to cost more, and that it would, they're already feeling like they're at their capacity already. So
that was Easthampton.
Not just a simple sign on kind of thing in either case.
That was Easthampton. I think we had the Paul Fergal from the planning board, that joint meeting we had. He queried the person in Easthampton, and they thought that the line was pretty full, but there might be a way to tie in somewhere behind the Hackworth Dance Studio, but that was a little unclear.
That surely was. And the word I get about Westfield, there are infrastructure barriers, for one thing. But the second part that I hear about Westfield tying in or doing anything close to the Westfield line is businesses are more inclined to go towards Westfield and be in Westfield for a lot of reasons. Number one, it's closer to Route 90. They're just more accommodating of commercial development down there. And it's not just as easy as, gee, can we get a factory in, you know, right in our industrial section down there on, before they get to the Westfield line. It'd be interesting to see what residents really want.
Yeah. And I guess just thinking about this with Ken, number 18, rather than just having people check which ones apply, could we do this where people put their priority? Where would be their first priority? So number 1 is, you know, intersection of East Street and County Road, for example. Number 2 is something else. I mean, to help us maybe narrow it down more, rather than just checking all the ones that, you know, if they check 5 of them, it's still not going to tell us that much. But if we had a sense of everybody would like something more toward Westfield, then that might help direct us better.
Yeah, I think having a ranking system could be helpful, and maybe cutting those options down. That's
Yeah.
possible. And you could, I guess, just through discussion of the committee, examine if you all know, you know, if there's been development through there, or if there's been discussion of zoning map amendments around those areas, that could help you, you know, remove certain answers, or maybe fine tune them to incorporate geographic
So
area.
you're thinking it might help us get a sense of what people are feeling would be an area of town that they'd like to see have more business. But the one, and guys, I'll ask this up for you, the intersection of College Highway and Fulmer Road, I wasn't sure what that was referring to, because right now we've got the ice cream shop and Lyman Metal. Is that what we're talking about in terms of that intersection?
That's Brickyard Road, Chris. That's not Fulmer. I don't know what at the intersection.
Oh, okay. Well, it's in between. Yeah, right. It's in between Fulmer and Brickyard. You're right. So that's what I didn't quite understand, is what was the intersection of College Highway and Fulmer Road? What was ever envisioned there as commercial development?
Well, that's, there is a very tiny commercial area there. As you know, there's there used to be a bicycle shop there, and there's a convenience store and a little gas station there. You know where I'm
But
talking
that's not Fulmer either. That's at the bottom of,
That's right around Clark Street.
Right.
yeah, that's Clark Street. So
Okay.
Fulmer Road is over where the town garage is. I don't think there's any.
Right.
Okay.
If we had to eliminate one, that would be one I'd eliminate.
Yeah.
I don't understand
It's
it.
confusing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that can go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can, you know, we'll come back to it, but just anyway.
On number 19, I still, I feel like if the Easthampton line and the Westfield line are not even viable options, why have them as options?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
Well, if it's not possible to hook into Westfield or Easthampton, why ask? What would be the point in getting people's opinion about where they'd like it?
Well, it may be a possibility in the future. It may take further development or, you know, negotiation, or cost a lot of money. But if we were to be able to find out if people really wanted to see that happening, we would then have to get that kind of response.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, this is a little bit of a misleading question, I think, because the reality is the only two places in town that are zoned industrial now are number 1 and number 2, right? So
there's a little tiny industrial area where Mormon Keystone is.
on Clark Street, right? But I mean, just having them check it, it doesn't get us any information, right? So we could do something about industrial development, but I think we have to really rephrase this somehow, because
I agree with that. I agree with that, Chris. Yeah.
the only places that are zoned right now for industrial are, you know, the Westfield line and the Easthampton line. So, I mean, as far as I know, and there may be others, maybe I don't know all that, to tell you the truth, but anyway, that's a question one. I think we shouldn't ignore the commercial development, maybe, or the light industrial, but I'm not sure that that's the right way to phrase it.
I agree with you. It's not about location, it's about how to encourage it.
Yeah, or even maybe the kinds of light industrial that we might want to encourage. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. But further food for thought. Okay, then all these crazy ones, I just, any thoughts, Ken, in terms of how people answer these kinds of questions in general? Are they pretty easy for people to deal with? The strongly support and strongly oppose? Do you find decent answers here when you put these kinds of questions out?
Yeah, I think it gives a good snapshot. These are probably more specific to zoning, and maybe offer some insight into any zoning changes that you may want to explore,
Right.
specific to, single family homes, maybe in creating some density elsewhere, larger lot sizes. I think it's helpful. There may be some questions that are not as helpful. But I think it crosses off a lot of, I think it can provide some insight into any zoning type solutions that you may want to explore.
And I guess the only question I have on this, and guys tell me, this was probably the long shopping list out of, the original plan, obviously. But now that we've kind of taken a stab at synthesizing that and thinking back to what Mike would have had in his plan, in his presentation rather, I mean, do we want to keep these the way they are for comparison's sake? There's an argument to be made for that. Or would we want to change these and put in the synthesized version that we've come up with? Like for chapter on housing or on land use or whatever it is.
Yeah, I thought this was a little too amorphous. I don't know. I sort of like the idea of, consolidating and based on our discussions, what these items might be.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at it, but I mean, I'm wondering if, again, we would have had our recommendations under those 8 different chapters.
Right.
But this seems to be both zoning and open space and little bit of housing.
Yeah, I think if you have a synthesized, consolidated list, that probably is more appropriate here, because if this was part of the original master plan, your solutions and your goals those were identified based on the results of this.
Right.
So I think if you've been discussing ways to address whether or not, you've done the proper zoning changes or land use policy, I think maybe the list that you have is more appropriate here.
Yeah. Maybe. Just a thought. We'd have to go back and look at the presentation Mike did to see how we could work with it. But okay. Sufficient housing options, yes, no. And then it goes into all the different housing ones here.
Well, these 22, 23, will they answer the stuff that Jim already sent to us? So
I think some of these may be similar to what he was trying to suggest. So I don't know if he had a chance. He might have given me those questions before he saw the survey, actually. So
right.
That's why I'm thinking he might have different ideas now. So we don't have to spend a lot of time. But there were a fair number of questions in here on housing, actually, which when I went through and looked at it, I was surprised that we had, half a dozen questions on housing, frankly. So maybe some of these could be consolidated, or we could see. But there's practically a whole page here on just housing, which was kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then the definition of affordable housing, which I think we do have to get across to people, because that is not clear to a lot of people, I think. So I think something about that would have to.
And I did look up what is the the median income, because this was the income in 2012 or 2013 for Southampton, and it's now, according to my source, $79,800.
Sounds right.
Pardon?
That sounds correct.
Yeah,
For a 2-person household?
that's it.
Wow.
No, I think
That's
it's
79?
for a 4.
Or for 4-person?
For a 4-person. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right, for a 4-person.
Okay. All right. Okay. So those would be things that we'd have to change, obviously.
Right.
Mhm.
And then this too went into the stuff on housing. So this is mostly, I mean, this would be a little bit similar if we think about Mike's presentation and say we came up with 5 things on housing, maybe we'd end up doing, questions like this. One is focused on housing, one is focused on energy, one is focused on economic development, so that we could kind of narrow these down per chapter or something, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Just ideas. I'm just tossing out ideas.
Yeah.
While I have a half a brain still. All right, we're going to take about 5 more minutes and then try to finish this up. So public transport, didn't seem to be a big issue before, but maybe it'd be worth checking again to see what people think about it.
Mhm.
The town sidewalk system, we've done a lot of that already. So again, this would have to be changed, I think. Some of the college highway stuff has been done. So we might have to rephrase the choices here, perhaps, if we wanted to keep that.
And sidewalks are mandated for all new road work, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
So this would be places though that so like, for example, whenever we get around to East Street, there'll be new sidewalk there.
Right.
But this would be for other places, I guess, where people might want to have a walking area that we don't know about offhand.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one about tax increases, I think, that notion of, would you be willing to support this? Tell us, what you're willing to put your money into. And it's both of these actually, 31 and 32, both talk about the tax base. So there might be a way to kind of combine those and make them, I don't know, just clear to answer. Trying to also, I mean, I think if we can make it a little bit shorter, it would be good, but maybe we can't. I don't know. And then this is,
The second question, or 32, I mean, talks about a two-tiered tax base, which we don't have, and most of the towns around us don't have.
right. That's true. That is true. Yeah. So that may not be.
I don't know that that's really relevant.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be what people, when you come back to this, they say, well, that's a disincentive for any business wanting to locate.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then 33 was again this, what Southampton should do. So again, I think you've got to we've got to put some parameters around that. With, I don't know whether it's something related to costs, something related to infrastructure. I mean, somehow we can't just leave it so open-ended. The town should do all of this. Well, we can't.
Yeah,
So,
I'd like to see, as you said, if we could ask people to prioritize, this would be a question. I would like to see the responses prioritized, because this is a huge, and many of the items are very important.
right. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea to create a priority list. And, that would force, the survey, the people answering the survey, what they think is most important to them.
Yeah, yeah.
And there might be a way, I don't know if there would be, sometimes these lists get so long that by the time you're down to number 18,
Right.
you're having trouble numbering. So there might be a way to do this where it's in smaller groups.
Yeah.
Again, somehow. And again, maybe following the theme of the chapters. Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's basically it. We're not going to worry about workshops at the moment, I don't think. So good. So I think in general, we think that pretty much there's a lot of good questions here. So we don't have to recreate everything by any means, but some of them do need updating or tweaking or combining. And I guess the question is, how do we go about that? Do we divide and conquer? Everybody try to take a little section and try to come up with something, or
Why
sometimes?
don't we all, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Nope.
Why don't we all just review it and make our adjustments and deletions and then come back and revisit it as a group?
Okay. Sounds like a plan. Yeah, I'm good with that.
I like that idea.
Okay.
Okay, yep.
Good. All right. So could we think about another meeting? What do you guys feel like? Are we, I mean, with everything going on and, you know, everybody being somewhat anxious and so forth, do we want to kind of keep pushing through this while we can, or?
I think the current anxiety is the new reality.
Right. Yeah.
We're not going to go back to the old way. So I think I'm in favor of using technology and using frankly, our time to push through as much as we can and get going on this. We've been doing it for a long time.
I know. Yep. Okay.
I wonder if people will be very interested in answering the survey in the near future. That would, being preoccupied as everyone is.
And that's going to be a question too. We've moved the annual town meeting is now to June.
Mm-hmm.
So we've actually got another month on it compared to where we were going to be, which is fine.
And that may change.
Yeah, that may have to change.
Right. So I think we're kind of following the flow here as it goes. But I guess I'm in a mood to kind of keep on going while we've still got some momentum and energy with us, and see how far we can get with this. So with that in mind, what's anybody's druthers for another meeting here? If I look at April, today's the 30th. So we have if we kept it on a Monday, the 13th or the 27th of April.
Yeah, 13th works.
13th.
Since taxes aren't due on the 15th, I think we're fine.
Ken, I'm interested in your comments, though. I think somebody just made the point of the population is under a high anxiety about everything right now.
Mm-hmm.
The DLTA grant only goes through the calendar year of 2020. I think weighing all these things out, I'm not talking about next meeting right now, I'm sorry, I'm just talking about the whole project. What would be sort of the focus on getting the survey out, getting the data back, compiling the data and contributing to your report creation, et cetera? What can we think of a time frame on this right now?
The thing is, I think that there's work that I can do right now. Obviously, it's the narrative to describe the work you've done. I think taking the information that the committee has put together and has brought to the select board, as well as the select board priorities, in some sort of rough way, format a way to present the information that has already been collected and that has been discussed. I think the community component is touchy. People may not want to interact with their neighbors in such a close way after this. I think there are ways to advertise the survey, and I think surveys are very helpful, and if we do a good push of it through the various means that we have, I think you'll get ample participation. It's the other types of discussions that you would have in person with people. I don't know. I really can't say. I think that there are ways to engage electronically, and our organization as well as others are exploring those ways and trying to fine tune how to do that. there may be a cost associated with that, and we'll figure that out. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely things that I can do to at least get you towards that final product. Obviously, the community engagement component is important, because that's what you want to include when you discuss with, you know, funding partners and whatnot. But I don't know if I have a timeline. I think up to October, any data that we can collect up to October would be able to be made into a report. You know, I can save that time for including that in whatever way it needs to be included. But yeah.
It's probably too early, but one of the things that we might find out over time is whether or not, given the unusual circumstances, the timing of the DLT grant might not be able to be extended.
That was my question, yes.
You know, everything changing, you know,
Yes.
couldn't there be an extra 2 or 3 months, for example? I mean, who knows?
Yes.
It's too early, I'm sure, but
Yes.
I think that might be, you know, something too that I wouldn't surprise me if that could be a possibility later on.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think, you know, to the extent we're thinking of a town meeting, you know, well, yeah, that would be in person. Yeah, to the extent we're thinking of town meeting in June, you know, I think we ought to still, you know, try to aim for doing something with a survey by around that time.
I would agree. I think, however you advertise a town meeting, it's going to be interesting how town meeting happens.
Yeah.
But that would be that would be a perfect opportunity to at least say that there's a survey. You know, maybe provide copies.
Yep.
Depending on where or how it's convened. But there's definitely ways to advertise that more widely at that time.
Yeah.
That would be my suggestion.
We can use our Easthampton media too and create like a public service announcement.
Yeah.
I mean, they're more than willing to do little advertisements for us. There's a fair number of people that actually watch our local 191 channel. And I think, you know, as long as it was out there and we could figure out a way to get it to them electronically or by mail if we had to, you know, I think there's ways to try to make the best of the bad circumstances we're in, I think. But
yeah.
I'm trying to remember, it seems to me as though the survey went to every household in Southampton
okay.
The first time around. And I actually think it should go to every household by some means or other.
If we can figure that one out. Yep. Okay. So it's a thought.
Can DLTA money be used for the mailing?
That's possible. I can explore that. I don't know how that works. The way we did it in the other town was providing just like a small flyer, a half pager with a link to the survey. I think also we explored having, again, that small document in utility bills. I don't know if that's something that can be done. I don't know how that works. Not necessarily a 15-page survey being sent to everyone, but every sort of document that goes to a town resident maybe would have, you know, the inclusion of that link to take it electronically, or a method to maybe go to the police department and pick up a survey, drop it off at the police department. We would do that, you know, and pick it up, you know, and have some sort of pickup schedule for that, something like that.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. So, so shall we all, based on Christina's point, we'll all kind of go through the survey and tackle some of the questions that we talked about tonight, rather than dividing them up. We'll all kind of go through and take a stab at it. Okay. And then do we want to go for the 13th as the next meeting? That's the day, it's Monday after Easter. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Fine with me.
I actually have Concom, so I may or may not be able to make
Oh,
it.
that's great. So do I, now that I think about that. Oh, dear. That's another,
Well, so let's do it on the 27th. That gives us a little more time.
okay, let's do that then, because Concom's been trying to do a Zoom meeting too.
Okay,
Okay, 27th?
7 o'clock, Zoom meeting.
Okay, good. All right, and then if we'll all sort of get into that survey. If you don't have the survey, let me know and I'll send it to you again.
Could you
Uh,
send it to me? Because I don't know that I
yes,
got it.
Okay, will do. All right, good. Well, thank you, everybody. I don't think there's any other new business, is there?
No,
Not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So
So
moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, adjourned at 8:40.
Thank you, Ken. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody. Yep. Thanks.
Okay.